This lesson will be an introduction to Revit MEP. So first, what is Revit MEP? Well, Revit is a three-dimensional building modeling tool, and MEP stands for Mechanical, Electrical, and Plumbing. So hence, we're using Revit to build a three-dimensional model specifically for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Now, Revit in the early days, specifically for MEP, started out as Revit Systems back in 2006. A lot of people have said it wasn't fully a BIM tool, but a lot of things have changed since then. And Revit MEP is basically a fully BIM automated tool, just like its sister products, Revit Structure and Revit Architecture. This course, again, will focus on Revit MEP. We'll start out by looking at an overview of the Revit MEP interface. We'll talk about customizing that interface, creating shortcuts using our keyboard, and also looking at the working files that are included with each lesson. From there, we'll get into looking at the views, looking at the different orientations. We'll talk about project files, family files, templates. We'll also talk about the basic creation tools, such as how do you create a new Revit MEP project? And once you have the project, how do you view the model in 2D? And then how do you view it in 3D? We'll look further in depth at the Systems tab as well, specifically HVAC, mechanical, piping, plumbing, and electrical. Then we'll move into the basic editing tools of Revit, moving, copying, pasting, rotating, mirroring, and arraying. We'll also look at extending, trimming, aligning, and offsetting elements inside of Revit. From there, we'll move into actually starting a new MEP project. We'll go through the fundamentals of setting up that project. We'll also take a look at how to create a link with a Revit architectural model. We'll look at the initial plan views when you create a project. We'll talk about that initial project information. We'll also talk about how you save your project in a standalone format if you're working by yourself, or in a work-sharing enabled environment if you're working with a team. We'll also look at linking other types of files, such as 2D CAD files for elevations and floor plans. Now, once we have our project started, we have to set up our views. That'll be the next thing that we tackle. We'll look at creating our basic views, controlling the visibility of those views, and discussing what type of view settings we have for each view. We'll create section views, elevation views. We'll create callouts for those views. We'll talk about the depth range or view range of each of these views, specifically our floor and ceiling plan views. We'll talk about creating view templates. We'll talk about three-dimensional controls such as scope box and section boxes. Now, once we have our views set up, we need to define the area for where we'll place our systems. So here we'll define rooms and we'll tag our rooms. We'll do the same thing with spaces and zones. We can even create color schemes for these different areas. Now, one thing we can do is run an analysis for each of these zones or spaces that we create. This would be called the energy analysis, and we'll look at the different settings and the actual execution of the analysis, including exporting for secondary analysis. Then we'll get into our actual systems. We'll look at the overall systems from the system browser, system settings, and overrides for these systems. The first system we'll look at will be our HVAC mechanical system. Things such as ductwork, air terminals, and mechanical equipment. We'll look at how we can place these elements, how we can add insulation, lining, and other elements to the actual ductwork systems. From there, we'll move into hydronic piping systems. We'll look at how we can place those systems, placing the mechanical equipment of those systems, how we can place tags, and then how we can route various pipes between our mechanical elements. We'll also move into plumbing systems, doing the same thing, talking about plumbing systems, the fixtures of those systems, and how to generate and lay out the pipes between the mechanical equipment. Fire protection would be next. This would be basically your sprinklers and the piping system that goes along with the sprinklers. Now, after our HVAC systems comes our electrical systems. This is where we'll actually lay out the electrical system, including electrical equipment, electrical devices, and lighting fixtures. Here we'll create circuits, switches, different power circuits, including cable trays and conduit. We'll also look at creating electrical panels and schedules for those panels. We'll also talk about other schedules for the MEP systems, including lighting schedules and different families of schedules, including material takeoff. From there, we'll move into detailing. basically creating 2D elements or 2D details to our views. How do we create that? How do we annotate that? And how do we save those views out? We'll also talk about detailing in 3D. And we'll also look at importing details if we've already created those. Now, after we've created the model and detailed the model, we'll look at more documentation such as your sheets. We'll talk about how to place views on our sheets, including setting up of your title block, view orientation, and revisions. We'll add dimensions, tags, and text as well. After all of that is on our sheets, we'll look at different ways to print our actual sheets or different parts of our actual project. Now, if you're working in a collaborative mode, we'll look at work sharing. We'll define what is work sharing, how users are set up within the work sharing environment, who has ownership, and how to attach or detach yourself, and look at the history of the work sharing. Lastly, we'll move into presentations. Here, we'll look at adding materials, different textures, to our different components within our Revit model. We'll create images, export those images, and lastly, we'll create a walkthrough basically showing what our space would look like if we were actually walking through that. So again, this lesson was a review or an introduction to what we will learn in this course. We'll cover a variety of things inside of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing areas of Revit.